February 8 readings. Barnabas, the Epistle of Barnabas, chapters 15. The false and the true Sabbath. Further, it is written concerning the Sabbath and the Decalogue, which, the Lord, spoke face to face to Moses on Mount Sinai. And sanctify ye the Sabbath of the Lord with clean hands and a pure heart. And he says in another place, If my sons keep the Sabbath, then will I cause my mercy to rest upon them. The Sabbath is also mentioned at the beginning of creation. And God made in 6 days the works of his hands, and made an end on the seventh day, and rested on it, and sanctified it. Attend, my children, to the meaning of this expression, he finished in 6 days. This implies that the Lord will finish all things in 6,000 years, for a day is with him as 1,000 years. And he himself testifies, saying, Behold, today will be as 1,000 years. Therefore, my children, in 6 days, that is, in 6,000 years, all things will be finished. And he rested on the seventh day. This means that when his Son comes again, he shall bring an end to the time of the wicked, judge the ungodly, and change the sun, the moon, and the stars. Then he shall truly rest on the seventh day. Moreover, he says, Thou shalt sanctify it with pure hands and a pure heart. If, therefore, anyone can now sanctify the day which God has sanctified, except he is pure in heart in all things, we are deceived. Behold, therefore, one truly rests and sanctifies the Sabbath when, having received the promise, wickedness no longer exists, and all things have been made new by the Lord, so that we may work righteousness. Then we shall be able to sanctify it, having first been sanctified ourselves. Further, he says to them, Your new moons and your Sabbath I cannot endure. You perceive how he speaks, your present Sabbaths are not acceptable to me. But that which I have made is, when, granting rest to all things, I shall make a beginning of the 8th day, that is, the beginning of another world. Wherefore, we keep the 8th day with joyfulness, the day also on which Jesus rose again from the dead. And when he had manifested himself, he ascended into the heavens. Augustine of Hippo. Confessions, Book 3, Chapter 3. Not even in church does he suppress his desires. The corruption of his heart. And yet, O Lord, your faithful mercy hovered over me, though I was far from you. Upon what unseemly iniquities did I wear myself out, led astray by a sacrilegious curiosity. Having abandoned you, I was dragged into the treacherous abyss of sin, bound in the deceiving service of devils, to whom I sacrificed my wicked deeds. Even within the walls of your church, while your sacred rites were being celebrated, I dared to desire and scheme for things that would lead me to death. Yet you chastised me, O Lord, with punishment severe, though far lighter than my guilt deserved. You, my greatest mercy, my God, my refuge from these grievous wounds, pursued me as I wandered away with reckless arrogance, turning from you, loving my own ways rather than yours, delighting in a false freedom that only led me further astray. The vanity of rhetoric and the courts of law. Even in the studies considered honorable, I pursued them only for vainglory. I sought to excel in the courts of law, where cunning and craftiness were praised as wisdom. Such is the blindness of men, that they take pride in their own blindness. At that time, I was the leader in the school of rhetoric, a position that swelled my pride. I rejoiced in it arrogantly, though I carried myself more sedately than many of my peers, as you, O Lord, know. I kept myself from the worst of those who were called subverters, a title worn as a mark of gallantry, though it was nothing but folly and wickedness. The wickedness of the subverters. Though I lived among them, I abhorred their acts, even as I found pleasure in their company. They delighted in corrupting others, attacking the modesty of strangers with cruel mockery, disturbing them with senseless insults simply to amuse themselves. Nothing could resemble the actions of devils more than this. And yet, what name could fit them better than subverters? For they themselves were first subverted, wholly perverted, mocked and seduced by the very deceiving spirits in whom they took delight. In jesting at and deceiving others, they themselves were deceived. Thomas Aquinas. Summa Theologica, Part 1, Question 18, Article 3. Whether God is life itself. Objection. It seems that God is not life itself. Life is said of living beings who possess movement and change, but God is unchangeable. Moreover, Life is something participated in by creatures, and whatever is participated in is distinct from the one who grants participation. Since God grants life, it would seem that he is not life itself but only its source. Responsio. God is life itself in the most perfect and absolute sense. Life, in its truest definition, consists in self-motion, not necessarily in the physical sense, but in the intellectual and self-directed activity that belongs to rational beings. The highest and most perfect life is that which belongs to intellect and will, since these faculties are capable of knowing and loving the highest realities. Now, God is pure act, actus purus, possessing the fullness of being, ipsum esse subsistens, and therefore his existence is identical with his intellect. His knowledge and self-understanding are not something added to his being but are his very essence. Thus, God's life is not derived or participated in, rather, he is life in its purest and most perfect form. Since God's act of understanding is identical with his essence, his life is absolute, unchangeable, and eternal. All other beings have life by participation, but God alone is life by nature. As Christ himself declares, I am the way, the truth, and the life, John 14:6. Therefore, it follows that God is not merely the giver of life but is life itself, uncaused, unchanging, and supremely perfect.